This is the production line for Panasonic air conditioners, which looks quite spectacular. However, as Panasonic continues to advance its de-Chinization process, the scene here may no longer be seen in China. Nikkei Asia recently reported that the Japanese electronics manufacturer Panasonic plans to move some of its home air conditioner compressor production capacity from China to factories in Japan. According to a Panasonic announcement that was revealed, Panasonic will invest 10 billion yen, approximately $70 million to build a factory in Kusatsu City, Shiga Prefecture, and establish a new production line. Panasonic will install automated assembly equipment, which is expected to double its production capacity. According to Panasonic's plan, starting from the fiscal year 2023, Panasonic will move some of its air conditioning business production from Guangzhou, China, back to Japan. Starting from the fiscal year 2024, Panasonic will continue to move the production of mid-range equipment back to Japan and aims to increase the share of domestic production in Japan from the current 10% to 40% by the earliest in fiscal year 2024. Not only Panasonic, but also other major Japanese companies such as Sony, Toshiba, Canon, and Bridgestone have been accelerating their departure from China. The ongoing exodus of foreign capital has become a major concern for the Chinese government. Chinese President Xi Jinping has had to take proactive steps to find solutions. Having just concluded his trip to Europe, Xi Jinping's overt purpose was to discuss the Ukraine issue, but his real aim was to try to reverse the tense trade relations between Europe and China, open channels for Chinese products to be well received in Europe and America, and prevent foreign companies from withdrawing. The AFP commented that although Xi Jinping received a royal welcome, there were virtually no breakthroughs, and the European Union's distrust of China appears to be growing rather than diminishing. China is losing its status as a top investment destination. On May 10, the EU Chamber of Commerce in China released a survey showing that as China's appeal to European businesses wanes, ASEAN has become the main beneficiary of redirected funds, followed by Europe, India, and North America. As the world's second largest economy, China is losing its position as the most attractive investment destination. After years of COVID-19 disruptions and zero-COVID restrictions, investor confidence and optimism in Europe and America have severely damaged. The implementation of China's new anti-espionage law on July 1st last year has intensified concerns among foreign businesses operating in China. The law expanded the enforcement powers of the national security agencies, including increased governmental search powers and the implementation of entry and exit bans. This has raised the legal risks for foreign businesses and individuals in China. According to a survey released in September last year by the EU Chamber of Commerce in China, which represents about 1,700 European companies in China, 50% of European companies see barriers to conducting business in China. 62% reported missed opportunities, and 11% of European businesses have shifted their investments from China to other countries. German-based international relations commentator Sherming told Radio Free Asia that European businesses in China mostly invest in physical capital, so the cost of leaving the Chinese market is very high. However, in the context of a weakening Chinese economy and an increasingly hostile political environment, foreign businesses had decisively begun to withdraw their investments. Xi Jinping's trip to Europe attempted to reclaim influence in the region, but success will probably be minimal. The European Union has lost confidence in the China controlled by autocrats, accusing the Chinese authorities of monopolizing the international market through unfair practices. Domestic and foreign businesses have lost confidence in continuing to invest in China, prompting them to divest and move to third world countries. China's economy once surged due to high-tech foreign investment and global sales of its products, but in recent years, as the Chinese economy continues to decline and numerous businesses close or leave, many people are feeling increasing job pressure. Unemployment is on the rise, with layoffs everywhere, making it increasingly difficult to earn money. Businesses are losing money, with wages not rising but falling. Despite this, there are still various performance assessments and pay cuts, making life more difficult. Therefore, people have curbed their spending. This has led to continuously rising unemployment rate in China. The government's latest release of the youth unemployment rate, excluding students, for the 16 to 24 age group stands at 15.3%, up by 0.4% from the initial publication. Many Chinese netizens mock these figures as lacking authenticity, stating, "The unemployment rate may lack realism, but the feeling of unemployment is real." Among young people who have long been despondent about the future, a post on WeChat titled, "10's No Youth" has gone viral. It lists specific actions such as not marrying, not having children, not buying houses, and not investing in the stock market. Netizens say that compared to official claims of a stable economy, the younger generation prefers to lay flat and not get up. Some college students anticipating difficulties in finding a job after graduation choose to pursue further studies. However, this only avoids the issue temporarily, as there is no guarantee that the job market will improve in 2 years. Currently, older individuals do not want to retire, and the number of college graduates is increasing, making future opportunities even more scarce. Dumping of the old three overseas, population divided attracts foreign investment. Since China joined the WTO, the Chinese government has leveraged its low-cost advantages, including cheap labor and loopholes in trade benefits, to dump cheap Chinese goods worldwide, forming a significant share in the global market for the old three: apparel, home appliances, and furniture. Chinese textiles and clothing have consistently accounted for 1/3 of the global market. Since 2006, China has been the world's largest furniture exporter, currently representing over 35% of global production. Chinese-made home appliances, washing machines, and refrigerators account for more than 50% of the global market, and air conditioners over 80%, making China the world leader in exports. At that time, the Chinese authorities, with their cheap labor, painted a rosy picture that attracted numerous global businesses to invest in China. Under foreign investment, the Chinese economy experienced rapid development, creating an illusion of a prosperous nation, and quickly became the world's second largest economy, second only to the United States, with Japan falling to third. The promising situation in China also caught the attention of the EU, who did not want to miss an opportunity to transform China. They naively thought that extensive investment in China in capturing the Chinese market would not only economically benefit the EU, but also help push Chinese society towards democracy. Negotiations for the EU-China Comprehensive Agreement on Investment began at the end of November 2013 and lasted for 7 years. The main content of the agreement fundamentally aimed to reduce the uncertainty for European investors in China. Just when the EU-China partnership was approaching a golden age, potentially replacing the United States, China's global plans reached their climax. In May 2015, then Chinese Premier Li Keqiang announced the ambitious government goal of Made in China 2025, aimed at revitalizing the industrial sector, including automation, microchips, and autonomous vehicles, to establish China's international competitiveness in these fields. Just as the Chinese authorities hoped their dreams would come true, the election of President Donald Trump in the United States occurred like a bolt from the blue. The US-China trade war disrupted the plans of the Chinese Communist Party, but failed to awaken a slumbering European Union. After Donald Trump took office, he immediately initiated a trade war with China. The US government accused China of stealing US intellectual property and trade secrets, asserting that the Made in China 2025 initiative involved unfair international trade practices, such as government subsidies and forced technology transfers to China. These practices were said to assist Chinese companies in gaining competitive advantages in various tech industries, thereby harming US interests and security. Trump directed the U.S. Trade Representative to increase tariffs on imports from China to reduce the U.S.-China trade deficit. In April 2018, the U.S. Department of Commerce initiated investigations to determine if certain steel wheel products imported from China were being dumped in the U.S. and whether Chinese manufacturers were receiving unfair subsidies. To prevent Chinese products from disrupting the U.S. market, the U.S. also imposed high anti-dumping tariffs on steel and aluminum products imported from China. For national security reasons, Trump cut off the ability of Chinese telecom giant Huawei to obtain chips through commercial channels. The US-China trade war disrupted China's global plans, prompting the Chinese authorities to more actively court their European Union. Despite the trade war, the then EU leaders did not become more alert to the dynamics between the US and China. On December 30th, 2020, after Xi's video call with EU leaders, German Chancellor Angela Merkel and French President Emmanuel Macron, both sides concluded final negotiations on the EU-China Comprehensive Agreement on Investment. Unexpectedly, in February 2021, a leaked internal Chinese document revealed that since late 2017, under directives from Xi Jinping, the Chinese central government's crackdown on terrorism and extremism has led to severe human rights abuses in Xinjiang. These abuses include strict restrictions on religious freedoms, forced labor, internment in re-education camps, forced sterilization, and destruction of Uyghur property. On March 22, 2021, the foreign ministers of the United States, United Kingdom, and Canada issued a joint statement condemning the Chinese government's repressive actions against Muslims and ethnic minorities in Xinjiang, highlighting that evidence of human rights violations was overwhelming. The statement detailed that satellite imagery, eyewitness accounts, and internal documents from the Chinese government provide irrefutable evidence of these human rights abuses. The nations pledged to stand united in exposing China's violations and advocating for those prosecuted in Xinjiang. They also called on Beijing to cease its repression of Uyghurs and other minority groups and to release all those arbitrarily detained. On the same day, EU foreign ministers passed sanctions against Chinese officials in a meeting in Brussels, citing human rights violations. Those sanctioned include Zhu Hailun, former deputy party secretary of Xinjiang, Wang Mingshan, a member of the Xinjiang CCP committee and secretary of the political and legal committee, Wang Junzheng, the political commissar of the Xinjiang Production and Construction Corps and chairman of Xinjiang Construction and Development Group, Chen Mingguo, director of the Xinjiang Public Security Bureau and the Public Security Bureau of the Xinjiang Production and Construction Corps. In response, the Chinese government immediately announced counter-sanctions against European politicians and scholars, sparking outrage across the EU. The EU passed a resolution stating that the EU's sanctions against China were based on legitimate and proportionate measures under international law aimed at addressing human rights abuses, while China's sanctions lacked any legal basis, were arbitrary, and targeted critics of its human rights practices. The aim was to deter the EU from acting against China's human rights violations. On May 20, 2021, the European Parliament voted to freeze the ramification process of the Comprehensive Agreement on Investment with China with 599 votes in favor, 30 against, and 58 abstentions, choosing to prioritize human rights over economic interests. This decision effectively ended the dream of comprehensive economic cooperation between China and Europe. As a result, the EU began to re-evaluate the global impact of China's state-controlled manufacturing sector. China's industrial tsunami awakens Europe and America from their dream. According to data released by the OECD in 2020, China's manufacturing output accounts for 35% of the global total, ranking first and equaling the combined output of the next 9 major manufacturing nations led by the United States. The potential global impact of China's product dumping, should domestic consumption falter, on the global industrial, economic, and political landscape is considerable. The Wall Street Journal recently reported that as China floods foreign markets with inexpensive goods, including electric vehicles, machinery, and consumer electronics, the US and global economy are experiencing a China shock. Unlike previous influxes, which mainly involve low-cost consumer goods, China is now engaging in unequal competition in high-value industries. French media, Le Monde, also published an article titled, "America and Europe Face a Chinese Industrial Tsunami." In recent years, the international community has been concerned about the intentions of major Chinese companies under the guidance of government economic plans to disrupt international markets and control the world. Notably, these include the Chinese government's substantial subsidies to the electric vehicle and other green industries, China's overcapacity in manufacturing, leading the dumping of cheap products worldwide, and market distortion. This not only undermines fair international competition, but also significantly impacts the manufacturing sector in Europe and America, contributing to the rising unemployment and trade deficits in these regions. In response to the Chinese government's attempts to monopolize international markets, the European Union introduced the Foreign Subsidies Regulation, FSR, which came into effect July 12, 2023. The regulation aims to effectively combat companies that have an unfair competitive advantage due to foreign subsidies, thus protecting fair competition in the EU market. In October the same year, the European Commission announced the commencement of an investigation into the substantial subsidies provided by the Chinese government to its electric vehicle manufacturers, which enabled them to lower prices aggressively in the European market. European Commissioner President Ursula von der Leyen stated that electric vehicles play a key role in the EU strategy to reduce carbon emissions. She complained that China was flooding the global market with cheap EVs and that Beijing was making prices artificially low via huge state subsidies. Data reveals that in 2023, China produced 9.6 million new energy vehicles and sold 9.5 million, leading global production and sales for the 9th consecutive year. Of these, 1.2 million were exported, a 77.6% increase from the previous year, with the European market accounting for 38%. A Nikkei News survey found that in the first half of 2023, among the top 10 recipients of government subsidies from over 5,000 listed Chinese companies, 5 were electric vehicle or battery manufacturers, with subsidy amounts increasing year over year. BYD, for instance, received subsidies totaling 1.78 billion yuan, nearly triple the previous year's amount. The U.S. think tank Center for Strategic and International Studies estimates that the Chinese government has invested $173 billion in subsidizing new energy vehicle companies aiming to dominate this industry. Chinese companies under the government subsidies are essentially operating within a socialist planned economy. Insufficient domestic consumption and overcapacity inevitably lead to negative impacts that are shouldered by the global community outside of China. Analysts believe that through policy-driven subsidies, the Chinese government aims to expand industries and engage in low-price dumping on the international market, effectively defeating foreign competitors. Dr. Frank Tianxie, a professor at the School of Business at the University of South Carolina, Aiken, said, "Even at a loss, the goal is to sell and sell, to crush the competition. Once the competition is defeated, the Chinese government naturally hopes to monopolize the market." He added, "Once China monopolizes the international market, it will certainly raise prices. By then, other countries' automotive industries will have been decimated, likely leaving them no chance to retaliate. This is the Chinese strategy. However, this is unacceptable to Europe and America." In response to competitive distortions, on February 16th this year, the European Union headquarters in Brussels initiated an investigation into whether subsidiaries of CRRC Corporation Limited, the world's largest manufacturer of rail transport equipment, received Chinese state subsidies and distorted the European market. Following investigations into electric vehicles and trains, Chinese solar companies have also come under scrutiny. The EU headquarters suspects that these companies have received government subsidies, allowing them to distort the European market with unfairly low-priced solar panels. According to EU headquarters, 97% of solar panels in the EU are imported, and most Asian giants rely on imports. The global severe supply surplus and mass imports have put European manufacturers under significant pressure. On April 17, President Biden called for a significant increase in tariffs on Chinese steel, electric vehicles, and solar panels, and aluminum products to curb China's dumping of excess capacity. The increase may also apply to tariffs on medical equipment. On May 6, Ursula von der Leyen met with Xi Jinping in a tripartite summit hosted by French President Macron. The use of anti-subsidy investigations and other policy tools by the EU has recently heated tensions in EU-China relations and remains a significant concern for Xi. During the meeting, von der Leyen conveyed to Xi that fair competition is beneficial for all, But the EU will remain resolute in making tough decisions to protect its economy and security. However, in response to Macron and von der Leyen, Xi Jinping stated that China's new energy industry has made real progress in open competition and insisted that China does not have a problem with overcapacity. Regrettably, Xi made no concessions on the trade issues of concern to Europe. It is not hard to imagine that the future will see democratic nations joining forces to encircle China, leading the Chinese economy into a severe winter.